Welcome to the Invest Like a Boss podcast.
I'm Sam Marks.
I'm Derek Sparts.
And I'm Johnny FD. We're self-made entrepreneurs who invest our own money and use modern technology to invest like a boss.
Join us each week for exclusive interviews with our network of modern investors, business owners, and multimillionaires to discover new ways to invest our hard-earned cash.
Recording live from the Danger Zone. It's Invest Like a Boss, episode 294. My name's Derek Sparts. I just flew into Los Angeles, and Sam, on the other end, flew over to Thailand. What's up, Sam?
Not too much, man. How's that song go? Highway to the Danger Zone. Danger Zone.
Take a ride.
I don't know. Actually, yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, I knew the Danger Zone part. I didn't know the other words. Anyways,
you better study up, Sam.
Man, we got a fun episode lined up for everybody today. I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about flying F-18 Hornets, option trades, psychedelics, healing, all types of good stuff with a profit underlying the whole shebang. Derek, we're talking to Matt Buckley today, my man.
I didn't even know who this guy was. And now after listening to this interview, I want to know like so much more about him. So how did you know who Matt Buckley is?
My dad's been following Matt Buckley for, it's got to be at least 10 years now. My dad's kind of retired, does some option trading on the side, and Matt's got a podcast and, as we'll talk about, kind of professional service called Top Gun Options, where he teaches people how to trade. But more than that, it's almost like you get a bit of history when you listen to him. You get, military chat, you get politics, you get, of course, markets. I mean, it's very kind of broad and enjoyable, entertaining discussion. So whenever I'm with my dad, we're typically listening to this, and, on the side, my dad's trading options. So I've never got into option trading. I always want to. It's always kind of on my list to learn. For some reason, there's a blocker, and hopefully we're going to talk about what that blocker may or may not be in this episode.
I've been the same. For some reason, I could never just pick up the concept of options. I don't know. I just had bad teachers, I think. I've had so many people try to explain to me, and it's just like, I don't 100% get it. So I've been really hesitant to actually do any options just because like a lot of the lessons we've learned on this podcast is if you don't know what you're doing, don't invest in it.
Which we keep doing, and we keep making mistakes, but it's all for the benefit of the listeners, right? I mean, it's almost like the listeners can play with house money, can play with our money, like see how it all plays out. But there is a lot of experimenting on this podcast, but also generally we're doing a lot of passive investing, right? Passive investing approaches. So this is an active investing approach. But aside from the option trading that we're going to talk about, I'm super excited to talk about psychedelics and opportunities to invest in psychedelics. Matt is super bullish on them. He's covered them a lot over the last 6 months, especially. And we've talked about psychedelics quite a bit on this show just recently. I would say in the last couple of years, just through at least my personal experiences and a lot of our listeners chiming in with their own personal experiences. Beyond the narrative of profit, these are going to be incredibly valuable instruments in modern society to help people heal and to make the world a better place. So Matt's been following the space for a while. I can't wait to ping him and ask him questions about it.
Yeah, and Matt just isn't a believer in the investment side of these psychedelics. He's actually a user. It's kind of like, what's that old commercial where the guy's like, I'm not just a CEO, I'm also the customer. I guess you could say Matt's a customer of psychedelics, and he believes that the results that he's seen, and he's seen, hundreds of other people, specifically veterans. Obviously, he was in the Navy. He was in the Top Gun program. That's actually a real thing. If people don't know, it's not just a movie. Like, to get into Top Gun, it's like the elite of the elite. Like, you can't be a dummy to get into Top Gun.
And Matt's been hanging out with some of the top NFL players, some of the most known Navy SEALs and combat veterans out there. So I don't want to spoil the episode. Let's get into it. This is one that you guys do not want to miss.
And I'm going to tease it, Sam. I listened to this interview and it inspired me to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to leave it at that.
Me too.
Oh, double tease. Well, let's get an interview. Here's Sam, and I'm going to use his call name. Matt, when he flew, was called Whiz. So here's Sam and Whiz. Hey, bosses, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. The show will be right back.
Families have a lot going on. Let Ollie help manage the mental load with new cognitive help supplements for everyone 4 and up, like delicious Lolly Focus Pops or Lolly Mellow Pops for kids. And for parents, try 3 new Brainy Chews to help you focus, chill out, or get energized. Find these cognitive health buddies for the whole fam at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
Matt Buckley, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam, thanks for having me, brother. I appreciate it. Really looking forward to this.
So much. Matt Buckley and car rides with my father have become synonymous.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, for many, many years now. How long have you had Top Gun options rolling?
And 2009, 2010, when we moved from Chicago, I was running helping run a volatility arbitrage firm up in Chicago in the Board of Trade. And I said, you know what, man, I'm a beach guy. I'm a Navy guy. I need sand and warmth. And Chicago was a little much. So I think 2009 or 10, we moved down here to South Florida and started Top Gun options.
Seems like a sensible move. Yeah, it's got to be at least, I would say 6 or 7 years now. I can remember listening to some replays with my dad on like some drives across the U.S. And I reside outside the U.S. now, but every time I get back and he picks me up from the airport, it's like Buckley's on. We get the political updates, we get the market updates, we get a bit of comic relief, kind of all in one swing. So it's been a lot of fun over the years.
Well, that's great to hear, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. You know, I'm always inspired by your story, which is lengthy when you get into all the different layers of it, but would love just to be able to tie in a bit of your military background because I think it's so relevant for what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of who I am and why I am where I am today. Absolutely.
Did you go into the military right after school or before school or in lieu of school? How did that all start?
You know, grew up in South Jersey, South Philadelphia. One of 6 Irish Catholic kids, so typical kind of Irish Catholic family. And most of my brothers and sisters went to school up there, you know, Villanova, Lafayette, GW. And I said, you know what, man, I'm going down to Florida. So I went down to school in Florida. And growing up, I was just always interested in the military. I lived on the Jersey Shore, so loved the beach, loved the ocean. And my best friend who lived across the street from me growing up, his dad was a pilot in the Air National Guard. He flew F-106s, and he was an Eastern Airlines pilot. That's how old I am. So this guy was like larger than life, man. He was a fighter pilot. He was an airline pilot. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty damn cool. So always knew at a young age I wanted to fly fighter jets for the Navy. And unfortunately, really going to date myself, in 1986, I was a junior in high school and Top Gun came out. So, of course, everybody and their mother wanted to be a fighter pilot at that point. And I was furious because I'm like, man, I was coasting in and now I really got to bust my ass. So I went to college down in Florida, commissioned in 1991 as an ensign in the Navy. And anything in the military, especially in aviation, is a pyramid, right? So I went, you know, when you go to flight school, the Navy has a lot of airplanes. They have, you know, helicopters, a lot of helicopters. They have a lot of propeller planes, and they have a lot of jets. It's a pyramid. Everybody enters down here at the bottom at Pensacola Naval Air Station, and then you just got to keep busting your ass all the way up to get to the top of that pyramid. So you got to bust your ass to get jets. And then once you're in jets, you got to bust your ass to get fighters. And then once you are in fighters, you got to bust your ass to get, which was the new fighter at the time, which was the F-18 Hornet, which was, you know, the F-14 Tomcat as seen in the movie Top Gun, you know, big monster airplane, 2 dudes in it. I'm like, nah, man, I want to fly by myself, single seat, and fighter attack. So the F-18 is the first fighter attack aircraft built from the ground up to be a multi-role fighter. So I selected F-18s, and kind of the rest was history, man. Went out to the left coast out in California, couple deployments to the Persian Gulf. Flew combat sorties in support of Operation Southern Watch. So we were supporting the no-fly zone over southern Iraq. And I'm almost embarrassed to call them combat sorties because they were without a doubt the most boring flying of my naval career. It was just, you know, the most exciting was getting gas from a tanker or landing aboard the boat at night. Was the most exciting. It was pretty boring. The toughest flying I did as a Navy fighter pilot was at Top Gun, which makes sense, right? Because if we go anywhere in the world and we're surprised or we suck, then we failed. right? So Top Gun's got to be the toughest training out there. So everything else is kind of a letdown. There's a motto at Top Gun: you train like you fight, and you fight like you train. Flying up a Top Gun's pretty intense. I mean, our alphabet agencies do a pretty decent job of stealing or borrowing or acquiring enemy radar systems. So when you're like attacking a target up in Fallon, Nevada, you're getting lit up and illuminated by the actual enemy radars that you'd be seeing overseas. And then you're dogfighting bad guy pilots, which are obviously better than any other good pilot on the face of the planet. So Top Gun was the toughest flying I did in the military, but it was incredible. Tying into the trading, most guys are sitting in the ready room in between flights, with their boots up on the table, drinking coffee, talking out chicks or whatever. And I'm like doing the same thing, but I was always interested in finance in the background, right? You don't join the Navy to get rich or to, you join the Navy to serve your country and see the world. So I'm like, you know what? Probably not going to retire. You're not, first of all, going to retire with the military retirement rich. You got to have another career after that. I'm like, well, let me learn to invest. So I just started training myself, reading the Wall Street Journal, reading books on investing and trading. And it's interesting because I just, I'm no rocket surgeon, man. Trading's a form of combat. I like to tell people somebody's going to win and somebody's going to get their ass kicked. So why wouldn't you use the same tools and methodologies and procedures that, I used over the skies of Iraq or Top Gun to my trading? Having a strategy, contingency planning. Right before I went flying in a Hornet, I sat in the air conditioning, sipping on my venti upside down caramel macchiato, trying to figure out what could go wrong on this mission and deciding what I'm going to do now before it happens. Right. And that really works well with investing and trading. And we can kind of dig into that more. But that's kind of how I got into the finance stuff, was just kind of self-taught on active duty. And then my world completely changed in 2000. I said, you know what? I'm going to win the lottery. And the lottery back then was getting off active duty and going to be a rich airline pilot and getting a reserve job flying fighters. That literally was the lottery ticket, man. You still get to bend the jet around and fly fighters and go be a rich airline pilot, working one day a month, hanging out with flight attendants. Well, the best laid plans, right? And the morning of September 11th, 2001, I was packing for my first trip as a pilot for American Airlines. And it was over with, man. My wife came in and said, you better come take a look at the TV. An airplane hit the World Trade Center. I'm like, I'm busy, woman. Small airplane, bad weather. And she just kind of gave me a look. And I'm like, okay. So I went out in the living room and saw what everybody else saw. A beautiful day in New York City, not a cloud in the sky, and a big smoking fiery hole. So as I'm sitting there going through my mental aviation checklist of how that could have happened, boom, next plane hits. And I'm like, under attack. Immediately knew we were under attack. I still have it in my uniform here in my office to remind me. I went to my room. I pushed my American Airlines uniform in plastic. It came from the cleaners, the tailor, slid that over. I threw on my flight suit, put my boots on, and broke the land speed record in my old Porsche getting out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth just as they closed it, and went to a combat posture. So I went from potentially flying in an airliner that day to shooting one down, to maybe even shooting down a squadron mate, man. I think we had about 18 guys in my reserve squadron, and 15 of them were airborne that day flying. So imagine being ordered to shoot down an airliner full of Americans, let alone your best friend who you've known for years and served with. So it was tough, man. So in the blink of an eye, I lost, and I don't want to make what I went through sound any way tough, because I gave myself a half a day to mourn, man. Like, because I got furloughed, days later after the attacks, I got a photocopied letter from American Airlines HR saying you're furloughed, which is polite airline speak for laid off. So I'm like, I gave myself half a day to feel sorry for myself until I looked, on the TV to see people looking for loved ones, putting their pictures up at ground zero. I'm like, okay, dude, get over yourself. People got it a lot worse right now. So that's when I said, what had been a hobby up until that point, trading. All right, got to pay the mortgage, man. Right. You got a wife and you got a 8-month-old son. So buckle up. So that's kind of how I got steered to Wall Street from the military.
So Matt, I'm very glad we were able to hear that story. I have heard that before, and the last time I heard it, it made the hair on my arms stand up, and it did now. I mean, it's an incredible and touching story that everyone can kind of see through their own lens. If that happened today, touch wood, it doesn't. I mean, could you just rock up to the Air Force Base and and jump on a plane, or was it because you were
No,
still like in
man.
the reserves?
Yeah, no, I was still flying for the reserves. Yeah,
Okay.
so I was a reserve pilot in VFA 201, the Hunters. After they closed the base, or before they closed the base, me and one of my squadron mates made it out there. So we had two F-18 pilots. We called down to maintenance and said, "Hey, Chief, get 2 jets ready, get them fueled and ready to go." And that's when the general, there was an Air Force Reserve Squadron next to us, and they flew F-16s, and they were tied into NORAD. So the general called over and said, "Who's this?" I'm like, "Whiz." He's like, "Whiz, who do you got?" I'm like, "It's me and Gruff." He said, "Get over here, man. I got 4 F-16 drivers. Let's brief to fly combat air patrol." So we ran next door to the 457th Fighter Squadron, and it was like Lexington and Concord, man. You got a bunch of civilian soldiers, civilian aviators briefing, to get airborne. And we're in the command post, and the Pentagon gets hit. It was just
man.
like, holy shit, what's going? Get me airborne type of thing.
Right.
So I was active and flying the Hornet. So if that happened today, if they need me to fly a fighter today, dude, we're fucked. Canada and Mexico are invading, and Mexico is invading, but that's a separate conversation. But
it is.
I mean, I still have, I actually bought my own fighter jet. So I own an L-39 Albatross. It's a single engine 2-seat fighter jet that some countries still use as a frontline attack jet.
Wow.
I keep that down here just north of Fort Lauderdale, and we take donors to our foundation flying in that jet. So I still get to bend the jet around a little bit, but not like the old days.
Not like the Hornet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's going, flying the L-39's like going from a Ferrari to a moped. I mean, it's just not even. Yeah, it's not even in the same class. But it's still.
I can imagine.
I still get to smell the jet fuel and pull some G's every once in a while.
Amazing, man. Regarding trading, option trading? Do you think you were drawn to option trading because of your experience as a fighter jet pilot? I mean, option trading can be quite exhilarating, I imagine, depending on how you get into it. Or finance as a whole, or did you just see it as a way to make money?
Both. I'd say both. One was the adrenaline and I like being right, man. If you're flying a fighter jet and you're wrong, bad things can happen.
Yeah.
People die or you die. So not being wrong often was something that I enjoyed. And obviously making money. And then when I saw I didn't know I was good at it because I was trading in a vacuum, right? When you're kind of doing it on your own, I'm like, wow, this is pretty damn easy. Everybody is printing money.
Yeah.
Where have I been? Until I realized that wasn't the case. I was kind of doing pretty damn good. So I'd say both. It was to add some extra money. And then obviously when I lost my job from American, it was to make money. The thrill of the kill. And then, the options were because I'll never forget this in my first shore squadron where I was an instructor pilot in the F-18. I was trading some stocks in the ready room, of course. And my buddy's like, "Oh, you trade stocks?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's looking at my portfolio. He's like, "Dude, why aren't you selling calls against those long shares?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, you could sell some upside calls against these long shares and just make some free money this week." I'm like, get away from me, devil woman. Options is scary and tricky and ooga booga boogie. He's like, "Let's go to lunch." And it was the best lunch I've ever had. This guy, he graduated from college and he was a CFA for a couple of years, got bored with that and wanted to go fly fighter jets for the Navy. So he showed me at lunch. He's like, "Nah, dude, you own these shares. You could sell these calls out, to this date." And I'm like, "And I just get paid for that." He's like, "Free money, dude. Worst case scenario, by this date, if those shares are above that price, they just sweep them out of your account. If you like the stock, just buy it again and keep doing it." I'm like, "Are you insane that this is possible? How come I've never heard of this? I always heard options were dangerous." So my, shrimp are a vehicle for eating cocktail sauce. Covered calls are a vehicle for getting into the option space. So once I kind of said, "Wow, covered calls make sense," then I just really started digging into options. The next lesson was, why'd you even buy those 1,000 shares? You just came out of pocket a huge chunk of money, bro. Why don't you just go out 2 years into the future and buy these options? They're called leaps. So you just spent 10 grand on the stock. How about you spend $1,000 on these call options? I'm like, are you insane that this is actually a thing? So once I understood the basics of options, I never looked back ever again. And I was full throttle options trader.
Amazing, man. I mean, every time I hear you talk about options, I'm like, this is the year I'm going to get into options. And I still have, I mean, I've bought or sold less than 5 options in my life. It seems like there's so much interest in it, but people have trouble taking that leap. You know, I guess I commonly hear, and this could totally be a myth, be good to get your opinion on it, that 95% of people that start trading options and or Forex lose. What do you see with all the people that you have contact with?
No, not at Top Gun Options, man. I'll tell you that. That's I'd go the other way. I'd say 95% of people at Top Gun Options make money and 5% just don't get it. Forex, not a Forex guy. Okay. Don't care. I'm an equity options guy. You know, Amazon, Microsoft, psychedelic stocks, you know. So no, that's just completely, I mean, what was the movie? Sands of Iwo Jima, you know, John Wayne. Famous quote, life's tough. It's even tougher if you're stupid. If you don't know what you're doing, you know, if you go jump in an F-18 just after reading a book and you crash, you know, you're an idiot. You deserved it. But options trading, it's funny because people are like, oh, it sounds dangerous. It's less dangerous. You have the same risk, right? If you buy 1,000 shares of Amazon or, you know, 10 options contracts, it's the same risk. The stock can go to zero, right? But as an options trader, I lose a hell of a lot more money than a stock person who's buying the stock. Why would you buy the stock when you can rent it? You know, the average, this isn't your father and mother's stock market, right? In the old days, my dad bought stock in like GM. They mailed it to you. You got the physical shares. You put them in a shoebox in your closet and you look at them 20 years later. The average holding time for people holding stocks is just around a year. Right. Most people are either out, you know, and even the people that are like, I bought Apple and I'm holding it. Well, Apple's getting destroyed right now because it sucks. So buy and hold's dead. So that's why when you look at leaps, longer dated options, they're out 2 years, 2.5 years into the future. So it makes the only reason, you know, somebody should or would consider buying a stock, dividend. But dividends are for my mother. I have zero interest in a dividend, a couple % here and then. The returns I get out of options trading are just absolute insanity versus the risk that I'm taking. So just a little, you know, you should join TGO because I have a training program called Full Throttle. I just literally copied and pasted it from flight training in Pensacola, Florida. I had guys in my flight school class. The one guy, his first flight on an airplane was from Montana to Pensacola. He'd never even been on an airplane before. Here he is in flight school. And I had a guy with 6,000 hours. He was like a Learjet pilot and wanted to fly fighters for the Navy. He almost failed out, the 6,000 hours guy, and the guy who's never been on an airliner did great. So it's about the training. The Navy takes a building block approach, just like I do. We start Full Throttle training with, this is the market. These are stocks, these are options. And then we take that building block approach. I think people, you know, kind of get a little sideways about options because they see, you know, an options guy at a cocktail party, like, I'm doing a reverse calendar fly split with a double gainer, you know. I call those people out on their bullshit all the time, man. I think there's like, it's called an OPCL, an options pocket checklist. In the fighter jet, we have what's called a PCL. It's like the entire flight manual squeezed down into the need to know, and it would fit down here in your flight suit pocket. I made an OPCL, options pocket checklist, with the absolute need to know. I think there's like 32 tactics in there. I use in my entire options trading career of decades and decades, probably 4 of them. Wow. Right. So anybody who wants to go to the back of the manual and do all sorts of cosmic shit, I'm like, I can do the same thing like this. So I think that's what it is when options first came out, they really were old boys. First of all, it was calls, right? A call option gives you the right to buy a stock at a price at a certain date. And it was literally in the 70s, white dudes smoking cigars in the back room, like, hey, instead of coming out of pocket a shitload of money to buy the stock, why don't we come up with a contract that you could do? 98, not over 95 at a minimum. Last time I looked at the SIBO metrics, almost all options trades are out of. They don't go to expiration. People trade in and out of them. Here's a good example. I have a buddy down here in Fort Lauderdale. He's a yacht trader. He's never owned a 150-foot yacht in his life. He buys and sells the contracts, right? During the life of the contract, this yacht over the next 3 years quadruples in price. He sells that option to somebody else. So people have you do it with a house. right? Hey man, I love this house, but I want to keep looking for the next 30 days. All right, well, why don't I give the owner 10 grand to take this thing off the market for the next 30 days as I look around, right? So during those 30 days, the house is off the market. You gave the homeowner 10 grand. The state of Florida, the governor decides to put a prison in next door, and the value of that house essentially goes to zero. You're only out the 10 grand, man, right? So let's say during those 30 days, Jesus, Ganesh, Buddha, and Muhammad come back to life, and they set up a healing center next to that house, and the house goes to $1 billion in value. You have an options contract. It only cost you 10 grand. Now you're a filthy rich billionaire. So if you followed that just basic example, you know how to trade options. They're not scary at all. So make it the year, man. Get on board.
Year. Hey, that's all the encouragement I need. Also, the returns, like sometimes when you look at like the returns, like your returns, we talked to John Thomas. People just can't believe and understand the returns because a lot of things that we're doing is just passive investing, index fund stuff. You get your 8%, you sleep well, but thinking of 50% a year, 80%, 100+% a year is just like, it just doesn't seem stable or consistent. But it seems like obviously there's people with historical track records that have done exactly that.
Why are those returns you're citing so low? I did on my birthday of last year. My birthday is December 31st. My personal portfolio was up 152%. Here's a perfect example with options trades, right? The percentages can be insane. Recently, and we can talk whenever you want about this stuff, the psychedelic space, MindMed, MNMD. A couple months ago, it was $4 stock. I forget what it was. I'm like, buy this thing with both hands. They're getting ready to have some good results. People bought call options, came out with some great news. Stock went up to 10%. So we had people in the options who made anywhere from 600 to 800% returns in those call options. Because remember, with stock, the percentage return is always going to be smaller. If you buy 1,000 shares of Amazon today, you're looking at, and it goes up a little bit, it's a small percentage increase, right? But with the options, they're massive percentage increases for less risk. So again, that's why it always cracks me up to be talking to people who are like kind of new to options, and they've been lied to since day one, right? Let me get back to the smoke-filled room when they came up with options. This was for them. This was for the blue bloods on Wall Street. This was not for the unwashed masses. There is no way when they came up with the option space that they could, first of all, envision an internet or a retail trader. Retail traders back in those days, did buy GM stock. And so options initially were for the elite investing class. And now with the internet and all sorts of stuff, it's over with. So we literally have little old ladies in tennis shoes trading options and crushing it and destroying it. I helped a little old lady in Wisconsin, multimillionaire now, because the trading we were doing during the COVID crash. I had $2.5 million in profitable trades in a couple of weeks. Because remember, every day in the COVID crash, the smart money. Oh, this is the bottom. I'd be buying here. Boom, another 3,000. Donald Trump. I saved the tweet. He deleted it. Stocks are looking good here. I'd be a buyer of stocks. The next day, the Dow went down 3,000 points. So we were buying put options on the S&P 500, and it was disgusting. I had $50,000-$75,000 trades in the blink on limited risk. So options are great, man. I can't speak more highly of them. You put in just the minimum effort, you'll be able to understand it. And like I said, the gateway drug for options, covered calls, man. If you own some stock, I hope to God you're selling some upside calls against it to bring in. You can lower the cost basis. I've owned stock before, and I've sold so many covered calls against it. The stock was zero. I didn't pay for it. All those, call selling paid for the long shares. So it cracks me up, man. Yeah, definitely do this year. You can learn how to trade options.
I've been holding some stocks for 10 years, never sold a covered call option.
Oh my God, man. You know how much money you missed out? I don't even want to talk about it. Jesus.
We got to keep Buckley on a little bit longer and switch off from NPR and Fox News, period.
Agreed.
So Matt, before we jump over into psychedelics quick, just again on full throttle. So if people want to come in to Topic on Options Full Throttle, can they literally just kind of follow you, like being at like a blackjack table and just betting on someone else's play? Like, can we just come in and follow your trades?
Sure, you can. I don't recommend it, man. And I tell people, so at Topic on Options, I do live trade briefs Monday through Thursday, about 10 to 11-ish. This depends on how verbose I am or what's going on in the market that day. And I do manage my personal money, my model portfolios in front of everybody. But I tell you, we go through I have a 7-step trade plan, man, before we get into any position. Before you squeeze the trigger on a live missile or a trade with live capital, we got a trade plan. We know when we're getting out for max profit or ejecting for minimum loss. All this stuff is mapped out before you even get in it. That's the number one, the biggest mistake I've seen out of retail traders is not having a trade plan. They're in a trade and they're like, wow, it's making money. I'm like, okay, when are you getting out? It's making money. I didn't ask you that. What's your profit target? Maybe I should know. No, maybe you should have known before you got into the trade. 90% of trading is emotional. If you trade with a checklist and you're disciplined, it takes the emotion out of it, right? Most fighter jet crashes are because they didn't follow the book. That's right. And I think I can stretch it, or I think this, or I think that, and they end up being wrong. We take the emotion out of it. Same thing with stock going down, right? Oh, it's, Apple doesn't hate me. Apple, it's going to come back. Apple would steamroll over your house. They don't give a shit about you. So if something hits your exit criteria, exit. Right. And so I tell people to keep a trade plan and actually to write it out, not like in an Excel sheet or some electronic document like my trade plan. Write it with your hand. There's something mental about picking up a pen, writing down. I have my trade cards right here. So weeks later, I look at my own handwriting that said, I agreed to get out of this trade at this point or for profit or loss. Why am I going to deviate from that? And if you do, okay, great. You're the pilot in command. You made that informed decision. But most traders are running around in positions where they don't even know when they're going to get out for either max loss or max profit or minimum loss.
Jumping over to psychedelics, man. I owe you a big thank you. Big thank you. Because you were the one that prompted me to actually try psychedelics.
No kidding.
I was terrified. I mean, it was always something that I was interested in. But dude, I'm like the guy that ended up in Miami-Dade ER for taking a weed gummy, eating a weed gummy like 7 years ago. Ended up in the ER, like just.
Oh no!
And so I was thinking, man, psychedelics is going to be like a whole nother level of that, like order of magnitude. But I mean, I heard you talk so strongly about it, and yeah, I mean, it was incredible, and I've been such a believer in this stuff ever since. Obviously set and setting, and you got to get a lot of things right with it.
Yes.
But I think, you've been looking at this space for a lot of time. I know you've experimented with different psychedelics. Like when would you say were the first time is that you tried? Was it psilocybin was the first one you tried, or?
No, man. I went straight to the top of the mountain.
No way.
So, oh my God, man. My first experience was with the world's most powerful psychedelic. In 2020, during the COVID crash, filthy money. I've never made that much money in my life. I'm not one to quote scripture too often, but it'll be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So I looked at my wife, I'm like, this is obscene. And right around that time, I had lost an F-18 buddy of mine to suicide. Beautiful bride and 5 kids. He put a bullet in his head. He was a groomsman in my wedding. So veteran suicide, anywhere from 22 to 44 veterans take their own lives in this country. That's a mass shooting. That's literally, could you, Matt, God forbid, if 22 kids were being shot every day in this country, even the gun nuts would be like, whoa, we got,
Yeah.
So I looked at her. I said, we got to do something. Let's start a foundation to try and end veteran suicide. I had no clue what you do, right? What do you do?
Right.
Help them write a resume, buy a suit. I was lost. I'm like, I'm doing something. And then God, whichever word you want to use, the universe, truth, divine, creator. I prefer to use the word God. God put a buddy in my life that said, hey, man, there's a group of, Navy SEALs, veterans and special operators that go down to Mexico and they do psychedelic assisted therapy to heal their traumatic brain injuries and their PTS. Would you want to go? In a couple of weeks, I'm like, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs? That sounds fucking great, man. Sign me up. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into. I'm a little glad I didn't. I still would have gone, but if I had, now that I have like a hell of a lot more, I'm like, wow, So if any of the listeners or viewers have seen the movie Lone Survivor or read the book, Mark Wahlberg played Marcus Luttrell. So I went down, flew into Mexico, and I met Marcus Luttrell and then Jared Taylor, JT, one of the founders of Black Rifle Coffee, another Navy SEAL veteran, and then an NFL player, All-American from Iowa, NFL veteran, horrific CTE.
Is that from concussion?
Repeated. Every tackle's a car crash, man. Ugh. This guy, I rode in the car from him from San Diego to the retreat center just south. He was dead. He was death. I was sitting next to it like a dead man. And bro, I'll give you the cliff notes. Iboga. So Iboga is a root from Gabon, Africa, from Central West Africa. Some think it's the tree of knowledge. It's root bark. And it's got like 14 alkaloids in it. In the West, they pull out one of the alkaloids. It's called ibogaine. And in the past, ibogaine's been used for addiction. 85% of heroin addicts, I mean, just at the end of their rope, heroin addicts who do one ibogaine treatment never even look at it again. Physically can't even do it with no negative withdrawal symptom. So the SEAL community heard about ibogaine for like addiction, because a lot of veterans have some addiction issues. And also the neuroplasticity. They looked at these heroin addicts and their brain scans and are like, So we did ibogaine, and it was a 14-hour, without a doubt, the most spiritual and incredible experience of my life. I got to experience my sister, who was killed by a drunk driver when she was young. I got to see my father again, who had passed of a heart attack. And wow, man, I was a drinker. I don't know if you can be a good drinker, but I was a bad drinker. 8 months after doing this treatment, I still couldn't even look at alcohol. Now I can have a glass of wine with my steak, but old Whiz, a glass of wine was the bottle or two. It was without a doubt the most life-saving and changing experience. So I got back from that retreat and I said, this is how we're going to end veteran suicide. I have never been a better husband, father, human being. So when I got back, I changed the name of the foundation and I called it the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. So now we give grants to veterans, because first responders, a lot of guys and gals leave the military. They take off that uniform and they throw on a state or local uniform. And when you take off that uniform, you didn't take off the trauma. I have a Marine buddy, 20-year Marine Corps, went to fire rescue down in Miami. He's like, dude, my Marine Corps, it was a joke compared to the trauma of being a first responder. So we give grants to veterans, first responders, and their family members, because they serve too, man. They can experience a lot of trauma, especially Gold Star spouses, wives and husbands who have lost their spouses. So, along the way, I really started digging into the psychedelic space. And man, the public psychedelic companies and the trials and everything going on, this is the only space I am bullish on for the rest of my life. I have a shit ton of money in various parts of this psychedelic space. The infrastructure, the FDA has given us a date, August 11th. August 11th, they're supposed to rule whether they're going to reschedule MDMA. We've all heard of MDMA, right? For therapeutic use. It's a felony right now, right? It's a Schedule I drug, man. Yeah. So you ready for this? The definition of a Schedule I drug in this country is no therapeutic use and a high risk of addiction. That's the definition of a cigarette and alcohol.
All right, there you go. Yeah.
100% legal. This stuff, you're going to federal penitentiary, right? That's the way we had to go to northern Mexico. San Diego, it's a felony. Hour south, it saves your life. So, looking into the public psychedelic companies, man, in the past, I'm glad we're talking now, because in the past couple months, many of these companies have reported insane results. Yeah. And kind of like options trader results, man, like 100. The 2 phase 3 trials with MDMA, non-treatable PTS. I don't call it PTSD, right? It's an injury, not a disorder. So non-treatable. I'm a political science major, man. So when I hear the words non-treatable, I think, well, these people you can't help. The first phase 3 trial with MDMA, non-treatable respondents, 63% were clinically healed. Not like, hey, we feel kind of better, healed.
Wow.
So MAP said, that's pretty good. Let's do another phase 3. They did 2 phase 3 trials. They found tougher PTS cases, 71% clinically healed. That's just absolute insanity. So MindMed, MNMD, MindMed last month released a phase 2 trial it was like 2 minor doses of psilocybin, I think 16 milligrams, whatever it was, like 70, I forget the exact number, north of 50% clinically healed from GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. 40 million Americans suffer from GAD. MindMed, MNMD, said this little dose of psilocybin, man, clinically healed. We could spend the rest of my time. I could go through each one of these companies and the things they're doing, but here's what it is. So Big Pharma is speaking with forked tongue right now. They're kind of bad-mouthing this stuff, ooga booga booga, but I know for a fact they're also doing this. So Iboga is a root. Ibogaine, you can't patent a root and you can't trademark a toad. But what they're doing is, wait a minute, Whiz was laying in a master bedroom with 4 other dudes getting their ass kicked for 14 hours in Mexico. Why don't we change a couple molecules and call it Ibogaine, trademark it, and charge 20 grand for it? So I tell people I'm bipolar because as Whiz, I'm furious at this. Healing's free. God put all this stuff right outside your door for you to be able to take and heal. And of course, man makes it illegal. But healing is free. So I'm furious at this. And then I'm going to put on my $10,000 Armani suit like Jordan Belfort or Gordon Gekko and say, good, Big Pharma is going to patent it, trademark it. So as an investor in this stuff, I think it's great. As a guy who runs a foundation, I think it's gross. So, but here's also what's going to happen. The psychedelic public companies, MindMed, Compass, Atai, ATAI, they're burning through cash, man. It takes a lot of money to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, FDA this. And so it's the Wild West right now. I know for a fact, Pfizer, Moderna, Eli Lilly, you fill in the blank, they're watching all this shit going on and they're going to jump in with their size 12 boots on and stroke a check. Hey, thanks for doing all the groundwork on this. Here's a massive check, or not even a massive check. It's ours now. That's going to happen. I guarantee you that's going to happen. So when we talk about options, for example, in MindMed, I've gone a couple years out into the future and I bought the highest strike calls I could get, man. And they were like 50 cents. Now they're like $5. Everybody's starting to wake up for this. So take a look. I strongly recommend you take a look at the publicly traded psychedelic stocks, because when, or if, I'm going to say when, the FDA says, you know what, MDMA legal for therapeutic use, all of these names, even if they're not dealing in MDMA, it's, most average investors are stupid. I forget some of the names of, like Spirit Aerosystems, that was building some of the Boeing parts, like when it broke it, like, hey, Spirit Air, parts suck. Spirit Airlines stock went down 1,000%. People are like, no, you idiots, it's Spirit Aeros. So, I think a rising tide is going to lift all boats. MDMA is legal for therapeutic use. Everything's going to rise here. But there is risks. I tell people it's the internet 1999. There's an Amazon and a Google and a Netscape and a Pets.com. You pick the right two, you're going to be filthy rich. You pick the wrong two. But most of these companies in the psychedelic space are all experimenting with different things. Generalized anxiety disorder, addiction. I think some of the medicines are looking at the people with the eating disorder. So they're all like a little niche-ish, helping different things. But it just goes to show you that these medicines, whether it's psilocybin or MDMA or ibogaine or iboga, they almost treat a lot of things. Let me tell you real quick. So one of the SEALs that I went with, he showed me his brain scans from the VA before we went to Mexico.
Okay.
And he was a breacher. First guy in. Explosives, boom. Dark, gray, black. He sent me a text 3 months after we got back. And the VA almost killed him from radiation. He's like, dude, I almost got killed from the VA. I'm like, what? He's like, wow. They kept taking x-rays or whatever. My brain scans were clear.
Wow.
The doctor's like, oh, the machine's obviously broken. Let's reshoot him. He's like, no, stop it. Complete neuroplasticity. Now, I didn't do the medicine to be a better trader or better at some things. When I got home, dude, everything in my life I was like Neo in the Matrix. First of all, maybe it's just because I felt better that things in my life all kind of got a little bit better. But dude, like Aaron Rodgers did ayahuasca, and he's like, I didn't do ayahuasca to be a better football player. I did it to be a better dude. I'm also a better football player because of it. So,
yeah,
you know, a lot of athletes are also looking into these medicines to increase their performance. We have on the board of directors of my foundation is Daniel Carcillo, two-time Stanley Cup champ, 7 concussions, man. And his best friend on the Blackhawks was Steve Montador, 17 concussions. Every concussion, the team doctors, the NHL docs are like, here's some Motrin, you're fine. So he died in his sleep at the age of 35. And when they opened up his head, he was dead, man, walking anyway. So Carcillo's like, dude, he's my best. That's me. He went to a brain center and they did all their workups and they're like, if an acorn falls on your head, you're going to die.
Oh,
it's
my
like, what?
gosh.
So he sued the NHL and all sorts of shit, but he went and did these medicines, completely healed the guy. Regrow neural pathways.
That is that's like, I hadn't heard that they would have that type of effect. You know, I thought it was more like you do them once and then maybe you pick up meditation, and then meditation over time will heal it. So maybe I just need to stop meditating and start doing more of these treatments, I guess.
I found hot yoga that led to breath work, meditation, and then that led to the medicine. So you're not supposed to grade your meditations, but some of my meditations, man, can get me back to that medicine state.
Wow.
You know, like I've sat with 5-MeO DMT. My meditations after doing the medicine were, not to use a pejorative term, but they were orgasmic. I mean, just a pure state of bliss and oneness. And when you can do that, you know, I meditate 2 times a day, morning and then 3 o'clock, you know, an hour before the close. And it just, I'm a different person when I do that stuff. I start, you know, some of my sales briefs now at Top Gun Options, I start with, how many of you meditated today? How many of you? And people are like, what? Where are your trades? I'm like, we ain't talking about trading for about another 20 minutes. When you get on a commercial airliner, what's the crew brief you? If we lose cabin pressurization, they tell you to do what? Put the mask on you first. You're not good to anybody else. You know, they don't try and put your mask on your kid. You got to put the mask on yourself first. So you cannot be a good trader if you're not centered, right? I tell people, how many of you came to this brief to learn to make money? Yay. I'm like, stop. I'm like, that's coming from a place of lack. First of all, we need to learn how to not lose money. We need to focus on capital preservation. Making money is if you're coming from a place of lack, man, I need to make $5,000 this month, Whiz. Yeah, I'm like, dude, I get it. We're human. We need these money things. But after doing these medicine experiences, I know that there's a hell of a lot more to life than making money. And I guess it's easy to say as a guy who's done a lot of things and everything like that. But I can tell even after these experiences, even if I didn't do and have everything I have, I would still think like that, right? It's the law of attraction. If you're coming from a place of lack and I need this, the traders that I know that have done these medicines, hell, there was a lot of stories last year about hedge fund managers and all these guys who are dipping into ketamine. Look at Elon Musk. You know, there's a hit piece every other week that Elon Musk does ketamine. I'm like, good. It helps that dude's depression, and he's
more.
Please, do some more ketamine, man. Maybe go do some psilocybin or something like that. So it really is starting to take over the world. I tell people there's 2 charts. There's a chart of the United States and the world. Man, we are fucking heading. We are on fire in this airplane, and we're flying right into the side of a mountain. Then there's another chart with the rise of people wanting to heal or be better. 5 years ago, Whiz, I would have swam across the Atlantic by now to kill as many Russians as I can, or Hamas. Now I'm like, fucking stop, man. Take a break.
Yeah.
Go to your corners, man. So another reason these medicines might potentially be illegal is they turn warriors into peacemakers.
Yeah.
I know how to be violent. I know how to fight. I can fucking, but old me, it's kind of settled the rage in me. I see a little bit more, I see more souls than I do shells and ego. So yeah, it was the most profound experience of my life. And the fact that I tell people it's a self-licking ice cream cone. You can make money and save and change lives. Right. Dude, that's where you want to invest. Yeah. Period.
If you want to support some good companies that are going to make a really measurable difference in people's lives, because
that's exactly right.
Your story is incredible. My experience is very similar. I didn't go meditation to these treatments.
Sacred.
But I went psilocybin, but then that turned on to meditation. That turned on to scripture. That turned on to basically reducing every possible bad habit, even like smaller things that like swearing and stuff, it's just like it just cleans up
exactly right.
everything. It's amazing.
Dude, I was a coffee fiend. I couldn't drink coffee for 6 to 8 months, man. It was like the alcohol. It was a complete system reset. Yeah. It's like it knocked off at that time 52 years of layers, and it showed me who I truly am. And sometimes I mention this and people definitely think I'm crazy. The number one, besides veterans, first responders, and family members that need psychedelic assisted therapy, people who are leaving jail on parole, period. Those people should be given this treatment to knock the crap off, to show them that you did something that you made you, quote, a criminal, but inside that shit, man, is you, and you're fucking perfect.
Yeah.
I guarantee, the guy from Harvard, tune in, turn out, drop out, he's like, we need to put it in the water. I went a little too far. It scared a lot of people, but I got his point, because there hasn't been one person I've helped with a healing grant to do a retreat, knock on wood, not one person that's come home and said that sucked and I don't want to help anybody or whatever. I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme. People heal, they feel better, they feel great, they're not drinking anymore, whatever, and they're like, man, I gotta tell people. That's how medicine is supposed to work. It's supposed to heal you, and then you turn around and put the ladder down to help others heal.
Even for the American public or public anywhere, like just knowing that people that are in prison that are getting out go through some type of treatment, I mean, it's something that everyone can really get behind, because we know how powerful it is in reforming all types of people, not just PTSD, but even just people with generalized anxiety or depression or whatever. I mean, even people that I think are in a good state of mind, it can just take you that much further down the road of developing virtues and higher levels of consciousness.
My wife's a perfect example. She's like, I didn't have that much trauma, but she sat with the medicine. She's better because of it, right? So, and definitely veterans and the military do a bad job at this. We trauma shame. I did that. I trauma shame myself. I'm like, dude, I was up at 30, 40,000 feet in air conditioning. These guys are watching their buddies' heads get blown off. My trauma sucks compared to theirs. Your trauma is your trauma. If something sucks for you, it sucks for you. Don't do that, right? So a lot of people do that. They're like, well, I don't want to, you guys suffered a lot. I'm like, everybody in some way suffers, man. Don't trauma shame or trauma grade. Something sucks for you, it sucks for you. And if you want to be a better human, husband, wife, father, whatever it is, there are ways to help you. And I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, not a psychologist, any of this stuff. There are so many different ways to potentially heal. You and I talked about breath work or meditation, yoga, walk on the beach, climb to a mountain in Nepal. There are so many different healing modalities. I like to tell people that, potentially radical trauma might need some radical healing. And these medicines are definitely not for everybody. I will say that to my dying day, but they are for somebody. And there's this, foo-foo sentence that I like to tell people. And 5 years ago, if I heard me talk like this, I'd steal my lunch money and give me a wedgie. But the medicine calls to you. So the people that are like, that sounds dumb, it ain't calling to them. The people that are like, you know what, dude, that made sense to me, and I'm thinking, or I feel it, and it's time to go. I'm like, then it called to you. So if it ain't calling you and you listen to all this stuff, it's not calling you. If you're like, and you start Googling or listening to my podcast or start doing a little digging, might be calling to you. All
right. Now, I think we got to wrap up pretty soon. Any companies that you really like in the space? I think you mentioned a couple of them, Atai,
MindMed,
or any trades that you could recommend?
Yeah, I like I said, Compass is another one. CMPS. I don't like Compass. I hate what they're doing. Wait a minute. You'd buy it? I'd buy it with both hands. It's a bipolar trade. Compass, CMPS, is going around the psychedelic space right now and like Pac-Man trademarking everything they can touch. They're like, if you do MDMA and you need beige colors, we trademarked it. I hate what they're doing. And I appreciate what they're doing. It's almost like domain squatting when the internet came out. I'm buying, sex.com, and now it's worth $6 million. So Compass sucks, but buy it. So
they're like
CMPS,
the guys you want to have, you don't want to have lunch with them, but you want to own the stock.
That's exactly right. I don't want them to watch my kids, but I want them to watch my portfolio. So Compass, Atai, ATAI, and MindMed, MNMD. And the last one would be Cybin, CYBN. Google Cybin, CYBN. Everybody who's an investor has had to have watched the Showtime series Billions. If you haven't watched Billions, you shouldn't be investing or trading. Anyway, the guy who's modeled, Bobby Axelrod in Billions is Steve Cohen. It's based after Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen just bought, I think he has a total of 30 million shares in Cybin. And right now it's a 50, 60 cent stock. So Cybin, I'd buy with both hands. Read about Cybin and the trials they're doing. His son, Stevie Cohen's son, was a Marine. Trauma, changed, healed. He's like, dude, I'm jumping into the psychedelic space. So the institutional money is getting ready to pour into the psychedelic space. And the last symbol I'll give you, if you don't want to pick favorites, PSIL, PSIL. It's an ETF. Okay. So it's a basket of 10 of the psychedelic stocks. So buy the ETF if you don't want to pick individual winners. You can spread your bets out. I love it. PSIL.
Do you know if there are options available on these stocks that you mentioned?
I'd say about 50%. Compass, yes. MindMed, yes. I don't think Atai yet. I don't think Atai is the only one. And I forget about the ETF, but a mixture of them do. As they grow and start moving, the options will come out. It's an agreement between the company and the SIBO, Chicago Board Options Exchange. So most companies in the psychedelic space will, because it's going to get them more capital, man. People like me, I look at I tend not to trade options on stocks under $10 because it's an option, right? It's the same cost of what the option would be. But for some of these I have, like I said, MindMed, I went out 2 years, bought the highest strike calls I could get, I think the 22 calls, and they're already printing money. The stock's currently at $10. So there's a shitload of people 2 years out into the future that are saying it's going to be way above 22. Some lottery ticket calls, I call them, but this is how you see people like, hey man, I made 3,000% in options trade. And people are like, that's not possible. I'm like, the hell it isn't, man. I do it often. So yeah, I think, and we're going to know, man, August. I told you August 11th, the FDA gave us a date. So the time is now. If you're going to load up on some of these names, I do it now.
Man, I'm holding my breath. This will be a win for America, not just for the stocks, but for America. They need to get this stuff passed. Yeah.
The world. I've heard from some Ukrainian veterans groups. I'm hearing from some Israeli. These people are going to need some healing, man. Yeah. The horrors going on in the world. I tell people, and this isn't a joke, I'm serious. If I kidnapped Zelensky and Putin and I took them down to Costa Rica or Mexico and they did a week of ibogaine, there would be no fucking wars. I guarantee you. And that's not bullshit. It's the truth.
I did psilocybin for the first time, right? Like days before or after the war broke out in Ukraine. I'm like, whoa. And I was in my 2-week like honeymoon afterwards where of the after effects where I'm like, I can't even look at any violence. I don't want to hear any swear words.
Exactly.
And I'm like, man, we need to get these leaders this experience. But
amen. Dude, you're preaching to the choir. I told you these medicines can turn warriors into peacemakers, which add to the reasons of why they're currently illegal.
Right.
They need, you look at the history of psychedelics, man. Here's a rifle, go kill some yellow man on the other side of the world. No, I love that guy.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. How? Well, I took these things and they made me love everybody. Okay, well, now those are illegal, and here's your rifle and still go kill that guy. God. So psychedelics being illegal, folks, was for a reason. Nixon and the war on drugs and all that bullshit, man. It's a disgrace. How can you make a plant that God put on this planet for us to heal illegal?
Right.
Well, yeah. Follow the money, Sam. Follow the money.
It's been so much fun doing this episode with you, man. Options, psychedelics, military history, good stuff. For everyone that's interested, Top Gun Options, Full Throttle, where can they find out more? What's kind of a good entry point?
Yeah, a good gateway drug to start at Top Gun Options, a quick website. It's go.topgunoptions.com/diverse. That leads you into our solo Amazon service. So if you're brand new to trading options and you want to just kind of dip your toe in, we just trade Amazon in that portfolio instead of 90 different names. We're just kind of singularly focused. So you could join that service. It's like $97 a month. Old me when I drank, that's an average bottle of wine for me for 30 days. So, go.topgunoptions.com/diverse, and that'll get you into our solo Amazon video, so you can kind of watch what we do.
Love it. Matt, thanks for your service and encouragement all around for so many years. We appreciate you.
You bet, Sam. Thanks for having me, man. God bless.
Hey, bosses, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. The show will be right back.
This episode is brought to you by ShipStation. If you run an e-commerce business, you know how much work it takes to produce something great while dealing with complicated shipping issues. That's why over 130,000 companies have turned to ShipStation, an innovative tool that allows you to focus less on shipping and more on building your brand. With ShipStation, you can manage orders, label printing, reporting, and customer service on one easy-to-use dashboard. You'll reduce warehouse costs with reliable enterprise solutions and save thousands on shipping costs with discounts up to 89% off. Plus, you can effortlessly import orders from everywhere you sell online. So, turn your shipping challenges into opportunities for growth. Go to ShipStation.com and use code POD to sign up for your free 60-day trial. That's ShipStation.com, code POD.
Sam, if you were in Top Gun, what would be your call name?
I don't know, man, but my life feels so boring after listening to Matt talk for the last hour.
I totally agree.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, how many lives has this guy had? He joins the military and then he's like, oh, I'm going to be an airline pilot. And I didn't pick up on it right away. And then his 9/11 story,
yeah,
that was his first week to fly. Like, how crazy is that? And then he's hopping in a jet to potentially shoot down an airliner. Got all that going. And then he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to jump into the financial markets. Does that, does very well. And then just does his own podcast, his own training program now. He's done like everything. And I feel like he's financially independent. He doesn't need to be doing any of this stuff, but he's doing this service and then starts a charity for veterans. Like, this guy is a doer. He gets stuff done.
Yeah, and what an amazing charity. It's not just going and kind of doing some passive school building in Cambodia. It's like, no, I'm going to take some of, the most, let's just say the most worthy people of need, and I'm going to take them down and give them and heal them. I'm going to heal them from something that was untreatable by basically modern medicine or any other approach. And I'm going to, give them a new lease on life. I mean, that's just awesome. Like, and that story of going down to Mexico, of like the SEAL from Lone Survivor and some of the NFL players and stuff. I mean, it's just amazing experience. I think, truthfully, that in no small part is he playing in this new movement in psychedelics. We need real advocates that have done it, have put themselves on the line, have healed through these things, that have microphones to go out and get this stuff moving in the right direction. I mean, this stuff's been illegal for 50 years? For what reason? I mean, it's ridiculous. How many people could this have treated in that time?
I think the biggest roadblock that he's going to face is from lobbyists for all these big drug companies. So I think maybe, he mentioned some of the companies that we're going to go over in a minute. Maybe some of these smaller startup companies in the psychedelic space, if they do get bought up by a Pfizer or some large drug company, that sounds bad, but it actually could turn out to be good, because then in turn, a large company like that can use their influence with lobbyists to actually get this stuff passed.
Well, let's hope. I mean, there's a lot of rhyme going on with stem cells. We just covered stem cells the last month or two. And I mean, that whole thing is ridiculous. I'm recommending stem cells to so many people now, and everyone's like trying to figure out where to go down in El Salvador and Panama and Mexico and stuff, and calling these doctors down there that they're not punctual, they don't have good processes. It's like, oh, I'm going to go get like some placenta stem cell injected in me from who, and like the doctor can't even stay like on a scheduled call or take my intake forms and stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. The fact that we're not getting people these treatments because of whatever, good intention or bad intention there is, it's wrong. It's wrong. People need to be healing right now, and they literally can't access this stuff in a comfortable place. They have to go way out of their comfort zone in most cases to access it. So I'm super bullish on this. Matt talked about like there's two charts. There's one chart of like the mental state of the world, which is not, I do think that America carries a lot of the stress and a lot of the anxiety of the world on a kind of per capita basis. But this is everywhere. People all over the world are suffering, manifest suffering, not just from war, but just like generalized living anxiety of trying to get by day to day. And like
Yeah.
Derek, I mean, I looked at one of your Instagram posts yesterday and you're like, I know it was a joke, but there's got to be some truth to it where you're looking around San Diego for a place to camp because your tax bill's so high, right?
There was a smidge of truth to that. I just had some PTSD of my own because I just got off the phone with my tax guy and I was like, you know what? I need to just go for a little bike ride at the beach and kind of clear my thoughts. And that's the first thing that came to mind. I was like, you know what? Why am I dealing with all this, paying taxes, doing all this stuff when I see these guys just living their best life, laying on the beach every day? That sounds pretty good.
Right. Why fight it anymore, man? Just
It's 24 hours later now. I'm feeling a little better. But
yeah.
So that's kind of the point. Like the stem cells you brought up, you and I have kind of been back and forth behind the scenes, trying to help your dad looking for some stem cells. When it comes to the psychedelics here, I think this could be really useful for my father, who he's served 2 tours in Iraq, and he's definitely had PTSD from that, and he'll be the first to admit it. But if I had to pitch to him, hey, you're going to go down to Mexico and meet some strangers and take this thing called ibogaine, good luck. He's never going to do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think the case it's similar with like stem cells as well. It's like this is something that is nerve-wracking to them, and they want a comfortable place and a doctor that they can communicate with and relate to, and in an environment that feels safe, and they're willing to pay a tremendous premium. I mean, with psychedelics, like Matt says, it's free. You can grow mushrooms in your house. In fact, like the place that I did it was in Spain at a local shaman's house. He grew his own mushrooms. You walk in his house, he's got mushrooms growing, and he's got Bach playing in the background so that the mushrooms can dance and to the melody of Bach. But that was $40.
Oh, is that it?
It was $40, and of course, I mean, it's cheap, right? But that's not for everybody. Like my dad's not going to go to the local shaman in Barcelona. and a lot of people won't. They want to go to a professional place, like good infrastructure, doctors in white suits, and like and that's fine, because honestly, this experience is literally priceless. It's not priced at $40. Yes, you can get it for free, you can get it for $40, but the effects of these treatments are literally priceless for the right people. I mean, dude, I was really, really in bad shape. I don't have any strict or strong trauma that I can relate to in my past, but I was in a pretty bad downward spiral. I knew I needed to do something. Took antidepressants. It didn't work, like anxiety and things just cut straight through that stuff. Unless you're going to get on such a high dose that you literally can't get off the couch. Like I knew I needed to try something. Meditation alone did not do it for me, right? I was just like, my mind was a mess in meditation. I tried psychedelics and it literally snapped this downward spiral. It like bottomed me out. It gave me a whole new like renowned view of life. All the things that I wanted to believe in, but like I never could really get my head around with like faith and scripture and meaning and stuff, all of a sudden started to make sense. That basically got me leveled out and then back on this like upward trend. That led to meditation. That led to like wanting to identify with like the saints of the world instead of like the business people and the egomaniacs of the world. That led to joining like a meta loving kindness group. That led to me shifting my interest from myself into other people. Like this is all from the base of a psychedelic experience. I've done it twice now in like a kind of a controlled environment, and I'll definitely do more of it. I'll continue to do more of it because it's, we need constant healing and constant inspiration. That did it for me. And I can only imagine the terror that some of our vets and people with trauma live through, because like, I mean, we've all had bad days, right? Bad days are bad days, but there's like living in a living nightmare is a reality for a lot of people that they can't get out of that nightmare. That's just an unfortunate truth. And we need some serious treatments to be able to remedy it. And I think like Matt said, God sprinkled these treatments all around the world for us to take and experience. But unfortunately, for the last 50 years or so, there's been a massive taboo about them, fear mongering, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, we need to bring this treatment to more and more people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I've seen it in you, Sam, that you've definitely changed a lot over the last year for the positive. And I think even the listeners, if you follow the show a lot, you can sense that something has changed. And if you think that it's tied to that, then that's just another case right there for the benefits of all this. I want to talk a little bit about trading this stuff because you, Sam, you have a history of getting really excited about something when you talk to someone. I do too. I'm not saying I'm not guilty here, but I have a feeling that you bought some of this, Sam. Spill the beans.
Bought it all, Derek. I bought it all. I loaded up.
Like all okay, so Matt mentioned 4 companies. Mind Medi dropped quite a bit. I'll put all these in the show notes too. Ticker MNMD, Cybin, CYBN, Compass, CMPS, and Atai, ATAI. Are you telling me you bought all 4 of those, Sam?
I bought all of them. And I did as you recommended. I mean, I've only bought 5 options in my entire life. Bought or sold 5 options in my history. I had to go back and research like what's what, right? But the ones that I bought options. I bought call options for as long a duration out. Some of them were like to November 24. Some of them I think were into 25, and a relatively high strike price. These are difficult to figure out how they're going to play. After my first experience of psychedelics, I immediately started thinking like, how do I invest in this, right? But then you sit back and you're like, well, what are the actual business economics of these drugs? Because if you take it once and it costs you $40 and you never touch it again, that's not exactly the best reoccurring business model in the world, right? And in some cases, like if this stuff gets really popular, I think people are just gonna be growing it on their own. So what are the actual business economics? Like if you want this stuff to be really a good business, it needs to be like really highly priced, or it's something you want people to be taking kind of every, once a week or every other day, almost as like a daily supplement. So I know people are now microdosing these. They're taking like little pills every other day type of thing, but I'm still not sure how it plays out long term. I think what Matt said is prudent and correct, where these are all relatively like micro cap companies. In some cases, they're $100 million, $300, $500 million, but most of them are under $1 billion. Shares are trading at like 50 cents in a lot of cases. And Big Pharma's going to have to get in somehow, even if they buy the companies and just sit on them and squash it. We've seen it happen in so many industries. They're still going to have to pay a high price for these. So whether they turn into businesses, I don't know, but will these companies be acquired? Well, let's look at this. Will these treatments be passed by the FDA for therapeutical use? I think there's too much momentum now. There's too much
seems to think
positive stuff. I don't think they could squash it from this point forward unless something super damning comes out, which I haven't seen in any of the clinical trials so far. So I think this stuff definitely gets passed. And what happens after that is very good chance that these companies are going to get swooped up or acquired, and or just the mainstream retail investor is going to jump in and be like, oh, it's the new green rush, whatever, it's the mushroom rush or whatever you want to call it, the healing rush.
The mush rush. I like it. I think we just coined the phrase, the mush rush.
Hey, squat on that domain.
Mushrush.com. Compass probably already has it, according to Matt. I think they really need to lean into this veteran angle of things, because if it has to go through the Senate or Congress or things like that, it's the role of the U.S. government to take care of our veterans. And if you found this breakthrough treatment that really helps veterans at the rate that they're claiming it does, and then Congress ends up being the one that blocks this, that's a huge red flag. So I think just from that a political standpoint, that's really the meat on the bone that they need to go after.
Yeah. And then let's get people healed. 30, 40 million Americans with generalized anxiety disorder. That's not fun. Like I've had that for multiple years. It sucks, man. Like it's hard to drive a car. It proliferates into panic disorder and stuff. It's nasty, nasty stuff. And giving people Xanax and Valium and all these things, like it's just a Band-Aid. It makes things worse long term. So let's get people actually healed. And this is something that can actually heal people. And like with a single treatment, man, a single treatment can heal people and get them a fresh look on life, get their bodies feeling good again, reset things. So this is going forward. There's just no way that this stuff gets blocked.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It'd be a crime against humanity. It already is. The fact that it's blocked right now is already a crime against humanity.
Let's get this passed. Let's get it going. And let's get into options, because I did something today that I've never done before. I sold my first covered call.
Derek, should we take a second just to slap ourselves and say, hey, okay, we've been having this podcast for 8 years now. What have we been talking about for 8 years? Like, we've only had one episode on options. We'll call this the second episode. How interesting is it when Matt was telling the story of like 20 years ago, and he was sitting there like at a desk, looking at his stock portfolio, and someone came over and was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just buying these long positions." And they're like, "Why aren't you selling covered calls?" And he's like, "What? What are you talking about?" This episode recording with him was that for me,
So I went down a little rabbit hole last night and I was watching video after video after video. I ended up, it was like 1 a.m. and I was like, I haven't even ate dinner yet. So
yeah,
I feel like I understand it so much better now. And I don't, in a matter of a few hours, I'm like, why didn't I just say, okay, today's the day that I'm going to figure out options years and years ago. And I just never did. So now it's like, it's not 100% crystal clear, but that's why I just started with the covered call, because that's kind of like the stepping stone to it. I didn't go crazy and buy calls on every one of these psychedelic stocks like you did, Sam. But I was like, I'm going to dip my toes into this. And I had a couple stocks that I was like, you know what? This fits the criteria with where I think it makes sense to do covered calls. And I actually put in 3 today. 2 of the stocks, they didn't have a ton of volume, so I wasn't sure if they would actually sell. But one was a large cap stock, and it did sell. And I was like, oh, I got money in my account. They just literally just paid me cash. That was pretty cool. And if this call actually gets exercised, I'm up on that stock too. So it's free money. Where was I at before with this?
Pretty good, man. This is really interesting to compare to, we do this where we compare like my E-Trade, which is my stock picking account, to Vanguard, to Wealthfront, which is like the robo-advisory. Guys, over the last 8 years, my E-Trade account is up 3.4% as of today. That is a massive loss when you consider the tax that I've had to pay on the income portion of that, plus inflation and opportunity loss. My account is even over 8 years. I cannot pick stocks better than the S&P 500. But what I could have been doing, a lot of the stocks that I hold in there, they're just going sideways for 5 years or something. I could have been selling covered calls against these stocks for that entire time. Even now, I just went in after this episode and I sold covered calls on 5 stocks. And these are all like 3-week covered calls that go out to basically the end of April. It generated like $1,200. So just on a handful of these for like a month, the monthly revenue is like $1,200. So that's easily that's like 14 grand just on those alone. We're talking like over 100 grand I left on the table. And these were positions that I'm happy to exit if the call is, if it goes up, because I don't really think they have a realistic chance of going up there. But if they do, I'll exit the position and finally clean up my E-Trade account.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just feel like this is common sense stuff that we should have been doing just to kind of maximize our returns. And that's a good pitch for our Patreon, I should say, because if you've watched our full quarterly updates when it's Sam and Johnny, Sam regularly shows his E-Trade account, and it's kind of sad, actually.
It's sad.
Sign up for our Patreon. Go to investlikeaboss.com, click become a Patreon. $5 a month. You can see all of Sam's bad decisions. I mean, that's worth it alone, right?
I do it for the listeners, Derek. I always recommend don't buy my metaverse portfolio. Instead, buy VGT. And if you did, you'd be up 50% instead of down 60% like my metaverse portfolio is. But if you go back, I mean, clearly the way to have done the metaverse portfolio is to buy options. It was not to buy, a few $100,000 worth of metaverse hyper volatile stocks. It would have been to buy options on it, right? So another thing to go back and play with.
If we could only go back 2 years ago to our metaverse disaster. I don't know if it's not a disaster now, because I held some of them and they did very well, but there's a couple stinkers and there's still Matterports. I would just, oh God.
Matterports, geez, down 90%. I'm still holding. It'll never come back. Never. Take the loss, Kosh. Take the loss. Derek, don't blame me for your
I'm not.
No, I mean,
it's my fault.
If you end up in the 10 on San Diego Beach,
okay.
I can't stomach that guilt.
Some days it doesn't sound so bad. So our guest, I think we got to have Matt back soon, because there's so much more stuff you guys could talk about. I hope you guys found this interview interesting as well. He did mention a course, I think, on kind of his beginner course that he introduced. It's basically just them trading options on Amazon stock alone. I'll put the link down to that. I know, Sam, you expressed some interest in that.
Yeah, Derek, I was just going to put you on the spot here. Do you want to do that together?
I'd be interested in taking a look at it. Is it
why would we not do that?
It just depends on how it's laid out. Are you just live trading all day with him? I'm not sure how it works, but I mean, we could look into it further.
Let's look into it. I think it's more like something like once a week or max like once. Yeah, I don't know. It's like a course. You're in the program and then you just trade one stock. So it's like Amazon. Amazon doesn't move too much nowadays, right? It's kind of goes sideways, it moves up and moves down, but it's not like these massive hops. So it's probably a good stock to learn how to trade options on.
Yeah, I found from what I've seen is kind of these middle of the road stocks are the best for options. If you got one that's going to spike like crazy, you don't want to have options on it. Or if you got one that's going to, that you don't believe in and is going to drop, just kind of those nice, steady, predictable ones like an Amazon, like he said, he's done so well on. So I think if you're like an expert on one stock and it kind of acts like that, that's kind of the key to it.
Exactly. And also, even if you're not like, I think this is such a value. What I picked up from this episode is it's such a valuable thing to learn, right? Like, and if you don't use it every month or regularly, just knowing it, you have it in your back pocket. Next time that COVID-25 comes out, you read the headline, you're like, boom, I'm going to go trade some options. Like Matt clearly printed money during COVID sell-off, right? So just having this skill in your pocket, because, every 5 or 10 years, there's going to be one of these black swan events and there's going to be an opportunity to make serious money if you have the right tool set.
Yeah, sadly, I think we kind of had a model for this type of thing to happen again soon. Unfortunately, I think it probably will happen. But maybe that'll be a fortunate event for us and some of the listeners out there.
Yeah. So I think that's at go.topgunoptions.diverse or /diverse if you want to check out that course, and we'll put a link in the show notes as well.
Let's plan on talking to Matt again later this year if you got the connection here. He seemed like a cool guy. You guys got along well. I think there's so much more we can pull out of this episode. And Sam, we got to do a dedicated options episode too.
Definitely. Also, I just want to say thanks to Matt for his good work in working with this foundation, No Fallen Heroes, sorry. And I checked it out. Charity Vest, Daffy, these donor advised funds, you can contribute to there just from there. So
love it.
Definitely got them slated as part of my annual contributions going forward.
Sounds good. Thanks again to Matt, and we will talk to you bosses next week.
Thanks for listening to the Invest Like a Boss podcast. Join our mailing list at investlikeaboss.com to get exclusive access to our insider investment portfolios and our private members forum.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends and leave us a review in the iTunes store. It helps more than you know. See you guys next week.